I never thought my neighbor would stoop so low as to steal winter gear off my front porch. But apparently Linda Henderson had no problem helping herself to my brand new heated gloves while I was out checking the mail. It was the second week of January in Denver, Colorado, and the temperature had dropped to a brutal 15 degrees. I had just moved into the Meadowbrook Hills community 6 months ago, purchasing a nice 3-bedroom house in what I thought would be a peaceful neighborhood. The community had an active homeowners association, which I initially saw as a positive thing. Boy, was I wrong about that. My name is Lucas Martinez, and I work as a mechanical engineer for an aerospace company downtown. I am a pretty laid-back guy who keeps to himself, maintains his property, and does not cause problems. All I wanted was a quiet place to live after my divorce finalized last year. What I got instead was a front-row seat to the most absurd display of entitlement I had ever witnessed. Linda Henderson was the vice president of the Meadowbrook Hills HOA, a position she wielded like a weapon. She was 52 years old with that distinctive Karen haircut, the kind where it is short in the back and longer in the front, dyed an unnatural shade of blonde with dark roots always showing. She wore too much makeup, drove a white Lexus SUV, and seemed to have nothing better to do than patrol the neighborhood looking for violations. I first met Linda about a week after moving in. She showed up at my door with a clipboard and a smile that did not reach her eyes. She informed me that my trash cans were visible from the street, which violated Section 4.2 of the HOA bylaws. I had to keep them in my garage or behind a fence at all times, even on trash day. I apologized and moved them, thinking that would be the end of it. It was not. Over the next few months, Linda found reasons to cite me for various infractions. My lawn was a 1/4 inch too long. My car was parked facing the wrong direction in my own driveway. I had a small package on my porch for more than 24 hours. Each violation came with a warning letter, and the letters always had the same condescending tone, reminding me that maintaining property values was everyone's responsibility. I tried to stay compliant. I really did, but Linda seemed to take a personal interest in making my life difficult. She would drive by my house multiple times a day, sometimes slowing down to take pictures with her phone. Other neighbors told me she did the same thing to them, but I seemed to be her favorite target. The situation with the heated gloves happened on a Tuesday morning. I had ordered them online because my old pair finally gave out, and these new ones had battery-powered heating elements built into the fingers and palms. They cost me $120, which was not exactly pocket change, but I needed them for my early morning walks before work. The package was delivered around 9 in the morning, and the delivery driver left it on my porch as usual. I was working from home that day and planned to grab the package during my lunch break. Around 10:30, I decided to check the mail since I was expecting some documents related to a project. I walked down my driveway to the mailbox at the curb, grabbed my mail, and headed back inside. The whole thing took maybe 3 minutes. When I went to get my package at noon, it was gone. At first, I thought maybe the delivery notification was wrong and the package had not actually arrived yet. I checked the tracking information on my phone and saw that it had been marked as delivered at 9:03 a.m., complete with a photo of the box sitting on my porch. I went back outside and looked around, thinking maybe the wind had blown it somewhere, but there was no sign of it. I have a Ring doorbell camera, so I pulled up the app on my phone and started reviewing the footage. Sure enough, at 9:03 a.m., the delivery driver placed the package right in front of my door. Then at 10:34 a.m., while I was at the mailbox with my back turned, Linda Henderson walked up my front steps, picked up the package, read the label, looked around to make sure no one was watching, and then tucked it under her arm and walked back to her house. I could not believe what I was seeing. I watched the footage 3 more times to make sure I was not misinterpreting what happened. But no, it was crystal clear. Linda had stolen my package right off my porch in broad daylight. My first instinct was to march over to her house and confront her, but I stopped myself. If Linda was bold enough to steal from me, I needed to handle this the right way. I saved the video footage to my phone and my computer, making multiple backups. Then I called the non-emergency police line to report the theft. The dispatcher was professional and told me an officer would come by to take a report. About an hour later, Officer James Rodriguez showed up at my door. He was in his mid-30s, with a no-nonsense demeanor that put me at ease. I explained the situation and showed him the video footage. "That is pretty clear-cut," he said, watching Linda pick up my package. "Do you know this woman?" "She lives 3 houses down," I said. "Linda Henderson. She is the vice president of our HOA. Officer Rodriguez raised his eyebrows. We get a lot of calls from this neighborhood. Usually noise complaints and property disputes." He made some notes on his tablet. The package contained what exactly? Heated gloves. They were $120. Okay, so petty theft. Anything under $1,000 is a Class 1 misdemeanor in Colorado. He looked at the video again. "With this footage, we have got probable cause. I am going to go have a conversation with Mrs. Henderson. Would you like to come with me, or would you prefer to wait here?" "I will come with you," I said. I wanted to see Linda's reaction when she got caught. We walked down the street to Linda's house, which was a large 2-story colonial with perfect landscaping and a 3-car garage. Officer Rodriguez rang the doorbell, and after a moment, Linda answered. She was wearing yoga pants and an expensive-looking sweater, and her expression shifted from confusion to alarm when she saw the police officer. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice tight. "Mrs. Henderson, I am Officer Rodriguez with the Denver Police Department. We received a report of a stolen package from Mr. Martinez's residence this morning. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions?" Linda's face went pale, then flushed red. "I do not know what you are talking about. I have not stolen anything." "Madam, we have video footage showing you taking a package from Mr. Martinez's porch at approximately 10:30 this morning. Can you explain that?" Linda glanced at me, and I saw real fear in her eyes. "That was a misunderstanding. I thought it was delivered to the wrong house." "The address label was clearly visible in the video," Officer Rodriguez said calmly. "And you did not attempt to return it to Mr. Martinez or notify him about the supposed misdelivery. Do you still have the package?" Linda hesitated. I could practically see the wheels turning in her head as she tried to figure out how to talk her way out of this. Finally, she said, "It is in my house. But like I said, it was just a mistake. Would you mind retrieving it for me?" Linda disappeared inside and came back a minute later with my package, still unopened. She handed it to Officer Rodriguez with a trembling hand. He examined it, confirmed my name and address on the label, and then handed it to me. "Mrs. Henderson, I am placing you under arrest for theft," Officer Rodriguez said. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." "What? You cannot arrest me." Linda's voice rose to a shriek. "It was a mistake. He is just mad because I reported his violations to the HOA." Officer Rodriguez continued reading Linda her Miranda rights while she protested. Her husband, Dale Henderson, appeared at the door looking confused and alarmed. Officer Rodriguez explained the situation to him, while Linda alternated between crying and yelling about how this was all a big misunderstanding. "She is going to be taken to the station for booking," Officer Rodriguez told Dale. "You can contact a lawyer and arrange bail if you want. Her court date will be set within the next few days." Dale looked absolutely mortified. He kept apologizing to me, saying he had no idea Linda would do something like this. I actually felt a little bad for him. He seemed like a decent guy who was just as shocked as everyone else. Linda was handcuffed and placed in the back of Officer Rodriguez's patrol car. As they drove away, I noticed several neighbors had come out of their houses to see what was happening. News travels fast in an HOA community, and I knew by evening everyone would know that Linda Henderson had been arrested for stealing my package. I went back home and opened the package to make sure the gloves were still inside and undamaged. They were fine, still in their original packaging with all the tags attached. I plugged them into charge and tried to process what had just happened. About an hour later, my phone rang. It was my next-door neighbor, Rita Chen. She was a retired teacher in her 60s who had lived in the neighborhood for 15 years. "Lucas, I just heard what happened with Linda," she said. "I wanted you to know that you did the right thing. That woman has been terrorizing this neighborhood for years." "I just wanted my gloves back," I said. "I did not expect her to get arrested." "Well, she should have thought about that before she stole from you, and honestly, this might be the wake-up call she needs." The HOA board has been getting more and more complaints about her behavior, but no one wanted to make waves. Rita told me that Linda had a history of overstepping her authority as vice president. She would enter people's yards without permission to take photos of violations. She filed complaints against anyone she had a personal grudge with. She even tried to get one family evicted because their teenage son played his music too loud. "Wait, evicted?" I said. "I thought everyone in this neighborhood owned their homes." "Most do, but Linda and Dale rent their house from an investor who owns several properties in the area. Linda does not like people knowing that because she thinks it makes her look bad, given how much she harps on about property values." This was interesting information. I thanked Rita for calling and told her I would keep her updated on what happened with the case. Over the next few days, the neighborhood was buzzing with gossip. Linda had posted bail and was back home, but she was keeping a low profile. I heard through the grapevine that she had hired a lawyer and was planning to fight the charges, claiming it was all a misunderstanding and that I had blown things out of proportion. A week after the arrest, I received a letter in the mail from the HOA. It was signed by Gregory Walsh, the president of the board, requesting my presence at an emergency meeting to discuss the incident with Linda Henderson. The meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday evening at 7 o'clock at the community center. I was not sure what to expect, but I showed up on time with printed copies of the video footage and the police report. The community center was a small building at the entrance to the neighborhood with a meeting room that could hold about 50 people. When I arrived, the room was packed. It seemed like half the neighborhood had turned out for this. Gregory Walsh was a retired accountant in his late 60s, balding with glasses and a kind face. He called the meeting to order and explained that they were there to address the serious allegations against Linda Henderson, who was seated in the front row with her lawyer, a sharp-looking woman in her 40s wearing an expensive suit. "Mr. Martinez, would you please explain to the board what happened?" Gregory asked. I stood up and walked to the front of the room. I explained the situation calmly and factually, from the package delivery to the video footage to Linda's arrest. I showed the video on a laptop connected to a projector so everyone could see exactly what happened. The room was silent as people watched Linda walk up to my porch, take the package, and walk away. When the video ended, there was a murmur of shocked conversation. Linda's lawyer stood up. My client maintains that this was an innocent mistake. She believed the package had been misdelivered and intended to return it to the correct address. The address was clearly visible on the label, I said, and she made no attempt to return it or notify me. She kept it in her house for over an hour until the police showed up. An hour is hardly sufficient time to imply criminal intent, the lawyer argued. Mrs. Henderson was busy with household tasks and had not yet had the opportunity to address the misdelivered package. That is not what the video shows, I said. She looked at the label, looked around to make sure no one was watching, and then took it. That is not the behavior of someone who made an honest mistake. More murmurs from the crowd. Several people were nodding in agreement with me. Gregory cleared his throat. The board takes these allegations very seriously. However, this is a legal matter that will be decided by the courts. What we need to discuss tonight is Linda's position on the HOA board. You cannot remove me from the board because of false accusations, Linda said, standing up. Her face was red and she looked furious. I have served this community for 8 years. I have done more for property values than anyone else here. You have also made a lot of people miserable, someone called out from the back of the room. There were murmurs of agreement. Gregory held up his hand for quiet. The board bylaws state that any board member who is convicted of a crime can be removed from their position by a majority vote of the board. However, Mrs. Henderson has not been convicted yet, only charged. Therefore, we cannot remove her at this time. This is ridiculous, another voice called out. She is on camera stealing. What more proof do you need? The legal system requires due process, Gregory said firmly. Until Mrs. Henderson is convicted or pleads guilty, she retains her position on the board. However, I am recommending that she take a voluntary leave of absence until this matter is resolved. Linda's lawyer whispered something to her. Linda looked like she wanted to argue, but finally she nodded. Fine. I will take a leave of absence. But when I am cleared of these ridiculous charges, I expect a full apology from Mr. Martinez and this board. I did not respond. There was nothing to say to that. The meeting continued for another 30 minutes, with various neighbors voicing their complaints about Linda's behavior over the years. It was clear that a lot of people had been holding back their feelings, and now that Linda was in trouble, they felt safe speaking up. One woman talked about how Linda had reported her for having a decorative garden gnome in her front yard, claiming it violated the aesthetic standards of the neighborhood. A man described how Linda had threatened to fine him $500 because his grass had turned brown during a drought, despite the city implementing water restrictions. Another couple explained how Linda had called animal control on their dog for barking, even though the dog was inside their house and barely made any noise. By the end of the meeting, it was clear that Linda had burned a lot of bridges. Gregory thanked everyone for coming and adjourned the meeting. As people filed out, several neighbors came up to thank me for finally standing up to Linda. You did what a lot of us have wanted to do for years, one man said, shaking my hand. That woman has had it coming for a long time. I appreciated the support, but I also felt a little uncomfortable being treated like some kind of hero. All I had done was report a theft. I had not set out to take down the HOA vice president. The next few weeks passed without incident. Linda stayed in her house and avoided me whenever our paths crossed. I did not receive any more violation notices, which was a nice change of pace. My court date was set for March 15th, about 2 months away. I would have to testify as the victim, and the prosecutor assured me it was a straightforward case. In early February, I got a call from Dale Henderson. He asked if he could come over to talk to me, and I agreed, curious about what he wanted. He showed up that evening looking tired and defeated. "I wanted to apologize for what Linda did," he said once we were sitting in my living room. "I had no idea she took your package. If I had known, I would have made her return it immediately." "I appreciate that," I said. "I do not blame you for her actions." Dale sighed heavily. "Linda has been under a lot of stress lately. Her mother passed away last year, and she has been dealing with some health issues. That is not an excuse for what she did, but I want you to understand that she is not usually like this." I did not entirely believe that, given all the stories I had heard from other neighbors, but I kept that thought to myself. "How is she doing now?" "Not great. She is humiliated about the arrest. She is barely eating or sleeping. Her lawyer thinks she should take a plea deal, but Linda is insisting on fighting the charges. She is convinced that if she can just explain her side in court, the judge will understand it was a mistake." "Dale, the video is pretty clear," I said gently. "She took my package. That is theft, whether it was a mistake or not. I know. I have tried to tell her that, but she would not listen to me. She never listens to me." Dale's voice cracked slightly, and I realized he was on the verge of tears. "Our landlord found out about the arrest. He is threatening to evict us if she gets convicted." This surprised me. "Can he do that?" "It is in our lease agreement. Any criminal activity on the property is grounds for immediate eviction. Linda did not think it was a big deal when we signed the lease, but now—" He trailed off. "I am sorry, Dale, I really am, but I did not create this situation. Linda did. I know. I am not asking you to drop the charges or anything like that. I just wanted you to know that there are consequences beyond the legal stuff. If we get evicted, I do not know where we will go. We have been in this house for 10 years. I felt sympathy for Dale, but I also knew I had done nothing wrong. Linda had stolen from me, and she needed to face the consequences of her actions. Have you talked to the landlord about working something out?" "He said if Linda pleads guilty and pays restitution, he might be willing to let us stay, but she refuses to plead guilty. She says it would ruin her reputation." "Her reputation is already ruined," I pointed out. "Everyone in the neighborhood knows what happened." Dale nodded miserably. "I know. But try telling her that." After Dale left, I felt conflicted. Part of me felt bad that this had escalated so far, but another part of me was angry that Linda still refused to take responsibility for what she did. She had stolen from me, and instead of apologizing and making it right, she was playing the victim and dragging everyone down with her. In mid-February, I received a subpoena to appear at Linda's preliminary hearing. The hearing was scheduled for February 23rd at the Denver County Court. I took the day off work and showed up in my best suit, ready to testify. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, with about 30 seats in the gallery. Dale was there, looking miserable. Linda sat at the defense table with her lawyer, wearing a conservative blue dress and minimal makeup. She looked smaller somehow, less intimidating than she had at the HOA meeting. The judge was a woman in her 50s named Judge Patricia Morrison. She had a reputation for being fair but strict, which I had learned from looking her up online. The prosecutor was a young man named Kevin Cho, fresh out of law school but eager and well prepared. Kevin called me to the stand and walked me through the events of January 12th. I explained about the package delivery, the theft, and the video footage. Kevin played the video for the judge, and I watched Linda's face as it played. She looked down at the table, refusing to watch. "Mr. Martinez, did you give Mrs. Henderson permission to take this package?" Kevin asked. "No, I did not." "Had you ever given her permission to enter your property or take deliveries on your behalf?" "No, never. Thank you. No further questions." Linda's lawyer, whose name was Michelle Garrett, stood up for cross-examination. "Mr. Martinez, is it possible that Mrs. Henderson genuinely believed the package had been misdelivered?" No. The address label was clearly visible, and she lives 3 houses away. Her address is completely different from mine. But is it possible she was not wearing her glasses and could not read the label clearly? She looked right at it. And if she could not read it, why did not she just leave it where it was? Michelle pressed on. Have you had any conflicts with Mrs. Henderson prior to this incident? She sent me several violation notices through the HOA, but I would not call that a conflict. I was just trying to follow the rules. Is it possible that you harbor resentment toward Mrs. Henderson because of these violation notices? Objection, relevance, Kevin said. Sustained, Judge Morrison said. Move on, Miss Garrett. Michelle asked a few more questions, trying to poke holes in my testimony, but there was not much she could do. The video spoke for itself. After I stepped down, Officer Rodriguez testified about responding to the call and arresting Linda. He confirmed that Linda had the package in her possession, and that she initially denied taking it before admitting she had it. When all the testimony was finished, Judge Morrison reviewed the evidence and ruled that there was sufficient probable cause to move forward with the charges. Linda's trial was scheduled for March 15th. As we left the courtroom, Michelle pulled Kevin aside for a conversation. I could not hear what they were saying, but it looked serious. Dale caught up with me in the hallway. The lawyer wants Linda to take a plea deal, he said quietly. She is going to recommend it to Linda tonight. That is probably a good idea, I said. I hope she listens. I really do, because if we get evicted, I do not think our marriage will survive this. I did not know what to say to that, so I just nodded and left. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Kevin Cho. I wanted to let you know that Mrs. Henderson has agreed to accept a plea deal. She is going to plead guilty to petty theft in exchange for probation, community service, and restitution. That is good news, I said, feeling relieved. I had not been looking forward to a trial. The plea hearing is scheduled for March 1st. You do not have to be there, but you can if you want to. I will be there. On March 1st, I returned to the same courtroom. This time, the atmosphere was different. Linda looked defeated, her eyes red from crying. Dale sat in the front row, his expression grim. Judge Morrison called the case and asked Linda to stand. Michelle confirmed that Linda was pleading guilty to 1 count of petty theft, a Class 1 misdemeanor. Mrs. Henderson, do you understand that by pleading guilty, you are admitting to the crime and waiving your right to a trial? Judge Morrison asked. Yes, Your Honor, Linda said quietly. And has anyone forced or coerced you to enter this plea? No, Your Honor. Judge Morrison reviewed the terms of the plea agreement. Linda would be sentenced to 12 months of probation, 60 hours of community service, and she had to pay me restitution for the cost of the gloves, plus the time I took off work for court appearances, which came out to about $400 total. She also had to attend a theft prevention program and have no contact with me unless necessary. You have anything you would like to say before I accept this plea? Judge Morrison asked. Linda's lawyer whispered something to her. Linda cleared her throat. I want to apologize to Mr. Martinez. I made a terrible mistake, and I am truly sorry for the trouble I caused. It will never happen again. It sounded rehearsed, but I appreciated the effort. Judge Morrison accepted the plea and imposed the sentence. Linda was now a convicted criminal, and her days on the HOA board were officially over. As we left the courthouse, Michelle approached me. Mr. Martinez, I want to thank you for not pushing for jail time. Mrs. Henderson has learned a hard lesson from this. I just wanted my gloves back, I said. I never wanted this to become such a big thing. Well, it is over now. Mrs. Henderson will fulfill her obligations under the plea agreement, and hopefully everyone can move on. I went home feeling like a weight had been lifted. The case was closed, Linda had been held accountable, and I could finally put this whole mess behind me. But the story was not quite over yet. About a week after the plea hearing, I saw a moving truck parked in front of Linda and Dale's house. I was not surprised. Their landlord had made it clear he would evict them if Linda was convicted, and he had followed through on that threat. Rita Chen filled me in on the details. The landlord gave them 30 days to vacate. Linda tried to fight it, but the lease was ironclad. Any criminal conviction is grounds for immediate eviction. I watched as movers carried furniture and boxes out of the house. Dale looked exhausted, directing the movers while Linda sat in her car, staring straight ahead. I felt a pang of sympathy, but I also knew this was the consequence of her actions. The day they moved out, Dale came over to my house one last time. "We are moving to Aurora," he said. "Dale found a small apartment that would take us despite Linda's conviction. It is going to be a big change." "I am sorry it came to this," I said, and I meant it. "So am I. But maybe it is for the best. Linda needs to learn that her actions have consequences. Maybe losing the house and her position on the HOA will finally get through to her." He paused. "I wanted to give you this." He handed me an envelope. Inside was a check for $400, the restitution amount. "You did not have to bring it in person," I said. "The court could have handled it. I know. But I wanted to look you in the eye and apologize one more time. What Linda did was wrong, and you deserved better than that." We shook hands, and Dale walked back to his car. I watched as they drove away, Linda still staring straight ahead, refusing to look at the house or the neighborhood she had terrorized for so many years. The next HOA meeting was a completely different experience. Gregory Walsh announced that Linda had resigned from the board, and they were accepting applications for a new vice president. The atmosphere in the room was lighter, almost celebratory. People were smiling and joking with each other, free from the constant fear of Linda's scrutiny. A woman named Barbara Thompson was elected as the new vice president. She was in her 40s, worked as a nurse, and had a reputation for being reasonable and fair. Her first act was to propose a complete review of the HOA bylaws to remove some of the more ridiculous rules that Linda had championed over the years. "We are a community, not a dictatorship," Barbara said during her acceptance speech. "My goal is to make this a place where people actually want to live, not somewhere they feel constantly judged and monitored." There was enthusiastic applause, and I found myself clapping along with everyone else. Over the next few months, life in Meadowbrook Hills improved dramatically. The new HOA board was responsive to concerns but not overbearing. Violation notices decreased by about 70%, and the ones that were issued were for legitimate problems, not petty nonsense like trash cans being visible for a few hours. I settled into a comfortable routine. I went to work, came home, took my evening walks with my heated gloves keeping my hands warm, and enjoyed the peace and quiet. My neighbors were friendlier now, no longer afraid of being reported for minor infractions. We had block parties and neighborhood cookouts, things that Linda had discouraged because they created too much noise and mess. Rita Chen started a neighborhood watch program that was actually about safety, not spying on people for HOA violations. I joined and got to know more of my neighbors. We looked out for each other, reported suspicious activity, and built a genuine sense of community. About 6 months after Linda moved out, I ran into Dale at a grocery store in Denver. He looked better than the last time I had seen him, less stressed and more relaxed. "Lucas, hey," he said, seeming genuinely pleased to see me. "How have you been?" "Good. How about you? How is Aurora treating you? It has been an adjustment, but honestly, it has been good for us. Linda is seeing a therapist now, dealing with some control issues and anxiety. She finished her community service, and her probation is going well. That is good to hear. She is not the same person she was when we lived in Meadowbrook Hills. Losing everything really changed her perspective. She is actually working now at a nonprofit that helps low-income families. It is humbling work, and I think it is good for her. I am glad she is doing better, I said, and I meant it. I had never wanted to ruin Linda's life, just hold her accountable for stealing from me. She wanted me to tell you, if I ever saw you, that she is truly sorry for everything. She knows she was out of control, and she is working on being a better person. Tell her I appreciate that. We chatted for a few more minutes, exchanging pleasantries, and then went our separate ways. As I drove home, I reflected on everything that had happened. It had started with a simple theft, a $120 pair of gloves, and escalated into an arrest, a conviction, and an eviction. But maybe it needed to happen. Linda had been on a path of increasing entitlement and abuse of power, and if I had not stopped her, who knows how far she would have gone. Back at home, I pulled into my driveway and noticed that my grass was getting a little long. In the old days, Linda would have already sent me a violation notice. But now I could cut it on my own schedule when it was convenient for me, without fear of harassment or fines. I walked into my house, grateful for the peace and quiet of my neighborhood. My heated gloves were sitting on the shelf by the door, a reminder of the crazy situation that had brought me here. I picked them up and turned them over in my hands, thinking about how such a small item had led to such big consequences. The Meadowbrook Hills community was thriving now, free from Linda's tyrannical rule. Property values were actually up, despite Linda's constant warnings that every minor violation would destroy the neighborhood. Turns out, people are more likely to take care of their homes when they are not living in fear of their HOA. As spring turned to summer, I found myself actually enjoying my house and my neighborhood for the first time since I had moved in. I planted flowers in my front yard without worrying about whether they were on the approved list. I left my trash cans out an extra day after a work emergency made me forget to bring them in, and no one sent me a nasty letter. I hung up a small American flag on the 4th of July without checking the bylaws first. The neighborhood kids played in the streets again, riding bikes and playing basketball without someone yelling at them to quiet down. Dogs barked occasionally, and no one called animal control unless there was a real problem. People parked their cars in their driveways facing whatever direction was convenient, and the world did not end. One evening in late July, I was sitting on my front porch with a beer, watching the sunset when Barbara Thompson walked by with her dog. She waved and came up to chat. "Beautiful evening," she said. "Sure is. How is everything going with the HOA?" "Smoothly. We have not had a single major complaint in months. A few minor things here and there, but nothing dramatic. It is amazing what happens when you treat people with respect." Linda could have learned something from that. Barbara nodded. "I heard she is doing better, though." Dale told Gregory that she is in therapy and working through some issues. I think the whole experience was a wake-up call for her. That is what Dale told me too. I hope it sticks. Me too. But either way, she is not our problem anymore. Barbara's dog tugged on the leash. "I better keep moving." "Have a good evening, Lucas." "You too." I sat there as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was peaceful, quiet, exactly what I had wanted when I moved to this neighborhood. It had taken a theft, an arrest, a conviction, and an eviction to get here. But we had finally arrived at a place where people could just live their lives without constant interference. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister asking how I was doing. I replied that things were good, really good, better than they had been in a long time. She was happy for me, knowing how stressful the situation with Linda had been. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, I thought about second chances and consequences. Linda had faced consequences for her actions, losing her home and her position of power. But she also got a second chance to become a better person, to learn from her mistakes and move forward. That was more than fair in my book. The community had gotten a second chance too, an opportunity to rebuild without the toxic influence of someone who saw power as a weapon rather than a responsibility. We were making the most of it, creating the kind of neighborhood where people actually wanted to live. And me. I got my heated gloves back and learned an important lesson about standing up for myself. I could have let Linda's theft slide, could have written it off as not worth the trouble. But I stood my ground, insisted on accountability, and it made all the difference. The next HOA meeting was in August, and I decided to attend even though I did not usually go unless there was something specific to discuss. The community center was about half full, a good turnout for a routine meeting. Barbara ran through the agenda efficiently, covering topics like landscaping contracts, pool maintenance, and upcoming community events. Before we close, I want to recognize Lucas Martinez, Barbara said, catching me off guard. Lucas stood up to behavior that many of us tolerated for far too long. Because of his courage in reporting theft and seeing the legal process through, we now have a healthier, happier community. Thank you, Lucas. There was applause, and I felt my face flush with embarrassment. I had not done anything particularly heroic, just reported a crime and let the justice system do its job. But I appreciated the recognition and the sentiment behind it. After the meeting, several neighbors came up to thank me personally. One woman told me that she had been considering moving because of Linda's harassment, but now she was staying. A man said his kids were finally enjoying the neighborhood because they did not have to worry about being yelled at for playing outside. An elderly couple thanked me for making the community safer. It was overwhelming in a good way. I had not realized how much my actions had affected the entire neighborhood, not just me. As fall approached, I received an email from Kevin Cho, the prosecutor who had handled Linda's case. He was following up to let me know that Linda had successfully completed her community service hours and was complying with all the terms of her probation. The restitution check had cleared, and the case was officially closed from the court's perspective. These kinds of cases can seem minor compared to violent crimes or major fraud, Kevin wrote, but they matter just as much to the victims. Thank you for following through and holding Mrs. Henderson accountable. Too many people let things slide, and that enables bad behavior to continue. I appreciated his perspective. The legal system had worked exactly as it was supposed to, and justice had been served. In October, the Meadowbrook Hills HOA held its first annual Halloween party, something that would have been impossible under Linda's leadership. She had always argued that Halloween parties created too much mess and noise, and she had refused to approve funding for community events that did not directly relate to property maintenance. Barbara and the new board saw things differently. They rented a bouncy house, set up tables with candy and snacks, and hired a DJ to play family-friendly music. Kids ran around in costumes, parents chatted and laughed, and everyone had a great time. I dressed up as a mechanic, which was pretty lazy given my actual job, but it got some laughs. Rita Chen came up to me while I was grabbing some punch. "Can you believe this?" she said, gesturing at the crowd. "A year ago, Linda would have shut this down before it even started." "Times have changed," I said, "for the better. You know, I have lived in this neighborhood for 15 years, and this is the first time it has actually felt like a community. We have you to thank for that." "I just reported a theft," I protested. "You did more than that. You stood up to a bully. You showed the rest of us that we did not have to live in fear of our own HOA. That is not nothing, Lucas. I accepted the compliment with a nod and a smile. Maybe she was right. Maybe I had done something important, even if I had not intended to change the entire neighborhood when I filed that police report. As November rolled around and the weather got colder, I found myself using my heated gloves regularly on my morning walks. Every time I put them on, I thought about the crazy chain of events they had triggered. They were just gloves, but they had become a symbol of something larger. The importance of standing up for what is right, even when it is uncomfortable or inconvenient. One Sunday afternoon, I was raking leaves in my front yard when a car pulled up that I did not recognize. To my surprise, Linda Henderson got out of the passenger side. She looked different, less polished than before. Her hair was a more natural color, she wore minimal makeup, and she was dressed in jeans and a simple sweater. Dale got out of the driver's side and gave me a tentative wave. Linda approached slowly, her hands clasped in front of her. "Lucas, I hope I am not bothering you. I know I am not supposed to contact you, but I got permission from my probation officer to come here today. I wanted to apologize to you in person." I leaned my rake against a tree and crossed my arms, waiting. "I was completely out of line when I took your package," Linda continued. "I was not thinking clearly, and I let my ego and my need for control get the better of me. I am not going to make excuses or try to justify what I did. It was wrong, and I am sorry." She sounded sincere, and her eyes were clear and focused in a way they had not been during the court proceedings. "I have spent the last 9 months in therapy, working through some serious issues," Linda went on. "I had this idea that if I could just control everything around me, if I could make everything perfect, then I would be okay. But that is not how life works, and I hurt a lot of people with my behavior, including you." "I appreciate you saying that," I said carefully. "I also want you to know that losing my house and my position on the HOA was the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to confront who I had become. I was not a good person, Lucas. I was angry and petty, and I used what little power I had to make other people miserable. That is not who I want to be." Dale spoke up. "She really has changed, Lucas. I have been with Linda for 25 years, and I have never seen her work this hard on herself. The therapy is helping. The new job is helping. Getting out of that environment was helping." "What are you doing now?" I asked Linda. "I work at a non-profit that provides services to homeless families. It is humbling work, seeing people who have real problems, not just grass that is a little too long or trash cans in the wrong spot. It has given me perspective." "That is good to hear." Linda looked down at her feet, then back up at me. "I know I cannot undo what I did. I know I made your life difficult for months before the theft, and then I made everything worse by not taking responsibility right away. All I can do is apologize and promise that I am working every day to be better." I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity, but all I saw was genuine remorse. "I accept your apology, Linda. I hope you continue to get the help you need." Linda's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. That means more to me than you know." Dale shook my hand. "Thank you for giving her a chance to apologize. I know you did not have to." They got back in their car and drove away. I stood in my yard processing what had just happened. Linda had owned her mistakes and was working to change. That took courage, and I respected her for it. Over the Thanksgiving holiday, I had dinner with my sister and her family in Colorado Springs. She asked about the situation with Linda, and I told her about the apology. "Do you think she meant it?" my sister asked. "Yeah, I do. People can change when they are forced to face consequences. Linda lost everything that mattered to her, and it made her take a hard look at herself. Not everyone would do that. Some people would just blame everyone else and never change. You are more forgiving than I would be. I am not forgiving her so much as acknowledging that she is taking responsibility. That is all I wanted in the first place. If she had just returned the gloves and apologized when the cop showed up, none of this would have happened. My sister raised her glass. Well, here is to standing up for yourself and to justice being served. We clinked glasses, and I felt a sense of closure that I had not felt before. The whole ordeal was truly behind me now. December brought snow and holiday decorations to Meadowbrook Hills. For the first time in years, according to the longtime residents, the HOA did not send out strict guidelines about what kinds of decorations were allowed. People put up lights and inflatable snowmen and nativity scenes and menorahs, whatever they wanted, and the neighborhood looked festive and alive. I put up some simple white lights on my house and a wreath on my door. No one complained. No one took pictures. No one sent me a violation notice. It was glorious. On Christmas Eve, Barbara organized a caroling event where neighbors walked around the community singing holiday songs. It was cheesy and wonderful, and about 40 people participated. We ended at the community center where Barbara had set up hot chocolate and cookies. Standing there surrounded by my neighbors, singing off key and laughing, I realized this was what community was supposed to feel like. On New Year's Eve, I reflected on the past year. It had been a wild ride, from moving into a new house to dealing with HOA harassment to having my neighbor arrested for theft to watching that neighbor lose her home and her position of power. But through it all, I had stood my ground and insisted on accountability, and it had made a real difference. As the clock struck midnight and fireworks exploded over Denver, I made a resolution to continue standing up for what is right, even when it is difficult. The situation with Linda had taught me that accountability matters, that consequences can lead to real change, and that communities function better when people treat each other with respect rather than fear. The first HOA meeting of the new year was in January, almost exactly 1 year after Linda had stolen my heated gloves. Gregory Walsh opened the meeting by reviewing the accomplishments of the past year under the new board leadership. We have seen a dramatic decrease in complaints, an increase in community engagement, and a genuine improvement in quality of life for our residents, Gregory said. This is what an HOA should be. A group of neighbors working together to maintain and improve our community, not a police force looking for violations. There was applause, and Barbara added, "We have also seen property values increase by an average of 8% over the past year, which proves that you do not need draconian rules to maintain a desirable neighborhood. You just need reasonable people working together." More applause. I found myself clapping along, grateful for the dramatic change in leadership and philosophy. After the meeting, I walked home under a clear winter sky, my heated gloves keeping my hands warm. It was cold but beautiful, peaceful in a way that I had learned not to take for granted. My house was warm and welcoming, my neighbors were friendly, and I no longer lived in fear of petty harassment. The gloves had cost me $120 and had indirectly led to someone losing their home. But they had also sparked a change that improved the lives of everyone in Meadowbrook Hills. It was a steep price for Linda to pay, but it was a price she had brought upon herself through her own actions. As I unlocked my front door and stepped into my house, I thought about second chances and fresh starts. Linda was getting a second chance to build a better life and become a better person. The Meadowbrook Hills community was getting a fresh start with leadership that actually cared about residents rather than power. And I was getting the peaceful, drama-free life I had wanted when I first moved in. Sometimes justice takes unexpected forms, and consequences can be harsh but necessary. The heated gloves sitting by my door were a reminder of all of that, a tangible symbol of the importance of standing up for yourself and holding people accountable for their actions. I hung up my coat, plugged in my gloves to charge for tomorrow's walk, and settled onto my couch with a sense of contentment. The saga of Karen stealing my heated gloves was over, but the lessons learned would stay with me forever. In the end, justice had been served, accountability had been enforced, and a community had been freed from the grip of someone who had forgotten that with power comes responsibility. Life in Meadowbrook Hills was exactly what it should be now: peaceful, friendly, and free from the tyranny of an out-of-control HOA board member. And all it took was $120 pair of heated gloves and the courage to report a crime.